Every word of Armond Bletcher's story is true, even though it sounds like it belongs in a dark biker film. Standing well over 6 feet tall and weighing more than 300 pounds, he wasn't just big, he was gigantic. Known for his fatal fists and unmatched strength, Bletcher became a legend in the world of the Hells Angels. But behind the frightening persona was a life shaped by pain, loyalty, and the inevitable drop into violence. His life and untimely death reveal the complexities of living on the edge, where respect is earned with blood and betrayal can come from those closest to you. A journey from bully victim to terrifying giant. Armond Bletcher's story began in surprising contrast to his later reputation. As a child, he faced constant bullying. He was smaller than his colleagues and often found himself the target of their taunts. But instead of letting these experiences break him, Bletcher channeled his frustration into physical training. Over the years, he transformed himself into a giant, both in size and reputation. By the time he reached adulthood, he stood between 3 inches and 6 and 8 inches, with muscles that spoke of a lifetime of lifting and discipline. It wasn't just his size that set him apart, but the aura of raw power that seemed to follow him wherever he went. This physical transformation was more than just a change in appearance, it was a shift in identity. Bletcher went from being a victim to becoming someone that others feared. In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, where respect is hard currency, Bletcher found that his strength allowed him to command attention and respect, even in the company of hardened bikers. Becoming a legend in the Hells Angels, joining the Hells Angels was a crucial step for Armond. He quickly became known as one of the most intimidating enforcers in the gang's history. Unlike many of his peers, who relied on knives or guns to settle scores, Bletcher preferred to fight with his fists. His massive size and strength made him an impressive opponent. Stories of him taking down multiple men in bar brawls became part of the lore surrounding him. To him, using his fists wasn't just a method of combat. It was a way of proving his dominance and enforcing the Hells Angels' reputation without needing to pull a weapon. Bletcher's reputation wasn't built on just style. Over the years, he was reportedly involved in more than 50 violent altercations, many of which he walked away from unharmed. Those who crossed paths with him knew that he could break bones with a single punch, and that made him both respected and feared within the biker community. His name became synonymous with the kind of brutal force that defined the Hells Angels during their most legendary years. For many, he symbolized the tough, uncompromising spirit of the gang, a man who could back up every threat with a fatal blow. The intersection of crime and celebrity. While Armond Bletcher's reputation was solid within the world of outlaw bikers, his connections extended beyond the shadows of the criminal underworld. At the height of his fame, Bletcher found work as a bodyguard for celebrities, including the legendary Frank Sinatra. For figures like Sinatra, having someone like Bletcher by their side was a statement. His simple presence served as a warning to troublemakers and excessive fans. For Bletcher, this role offered a peek into a different world, one where his physical power was valued not for establishing fear among rivals, but for protecting some of the biggest names in entertainment. His work as a bodyguard highlighted an interesting crossover between the worlds of crime and celebrity, where the boundaries were more blurred than one might think. Bletcher's presence at high-end events and exclusive clubs made him a well-known figure in circles that were far removed from the backrooms of biker bars. His reputation as a bodyguard allowed him to build new connections, giving him access to places where his Hells Angels patch might otherwise have been unwelcome. Yet, these two worlds, celebrity and crime, weren't as separate as they might appear. In many ways, his work as a bodyguard was an extension of the life he led within the Hells Angels. It was still about using strength and intimidation, just with a different focus. And through this role, he saw how power could be used not just with violence but with presence, a lesson that further sealed his approach to handling disputes within the gang. Loyalty and the Mafia's shadow. Bletcher's time with the Hells Angels brought him into contact with other powerful figures, including members of the Mafia. These alliances offered a degree of protection that few others could claim. Being connected to both the Hells Angels and the Mafia meant that Bletcher was protected from many of the dangers that came with his line of work. The law often turned a blind eye, and rivals thought twice before challenging him. It seemed like a perfect arrangement, where loyalty to the Hells Angels and ties to the Mafia created a protective web. However, these connections came with a price. As the FBI began investigating the activities of the Hells Angels and their associates, Bletcher found himself under increasing scrutiny. The very relationships that had once offered him protection now made him a target for law enforcement. Bletcher's situation illustrated the uncertain nature of a life deeply rooted in crime. While alliances could provide temporary safety, they could just as easily become liabilities when the winds changed. A lifestyle of danger and betrayal. For Armond Bletcher, living as a Hells Angel was not just about brotherhood, it was about constantly dealing with danger. Loyalty within the gang was intense, but often delicate. Rivalries, misunderstandings, and power struggles could turn friends into enemies in a heartbeat. Despite his status as a feared enforcer, Bletcher couldn't escape the dangers of the lifestyle he had chosen. The end of his life was a tragic reminder of the risks fundamental in his world. At just 33 years old, he was killed during a violent dispute with his own cousins. Accounts suggest that he suffered multiple blows from a baseball bat before being fatally shot. The very physical toughness that had made him invincible in so many fights couldn't save him in the end. His death was not just a personal tragedy, but a harsh example of how quickly loyalties could dissolve in the world he lived. Bletcher's demise highlighted a cruel irony. Despite being one of the strongest men in the biker world, he was ultimately vulnerable to the same forces that he had carried against others. It was a brutal, fitting end to a life defined by conflict and danger. The lasting legacy of Armond Bletcher. Even after his death, Armond Bletcher's name continues to echo through the stories and legends of the biker world. His life has become part of the mythology of the Hells Angels, a tale of a man who rose from humble beginnings to become a symbol of terrifying strength. For many, he represents olden days when the Hells Angels were at their most notorious, when members like Bletcher made their mark not with guns, but with their fists. His story also serves as a reminder of the darker side of loyalty and brotherhood within outlaw motorcycle clubs. For all the talk of friendship and honor, Bletcher's life showed how quickly those bonds could break under pressure. In a world where strength often dictated status, even a giant like Bletcher was not immune to the consequences of his actions and the danger that remained within his own circle. Armond Bletcher's legacy is not just one of violence, but of a constant struggle for respect in a world that showed little mercy. His story is one of transformation, of how a bullied boy became a giant feared by many. Yet, it is also a warning tale about the temporary nature of power and the high cost of living a life dominated by violence. Beyond the stories of his brutal fights and his time as a bodyguard, there was a complexity to Bletcher that often goes unmentioned. Those who knew him recall a man who could be both ruthless and loyal, someone who understood the value of respect in a way that few others did. He was a figure shaped by a world that demanded toughness above all else, and he embraced that role passionately. Yet his life was also a reminder of the limits of physical strength. For all the power that his size and fists brought him, they could not protect him from the dangers that surrounded him or the betrayals that eventually led to his downfall. In the end, Armond Bletcher's story is a reflection of a world where strength could be everything and yet mean nothing when faced with the complexities of human relationships and the unpredictable nature of violence. His story remains a bright piece of biker history, a reminder of the extremes to which loyalty and strength can push a man, and the tragic end that often waits on the other side.